Have you ever been talking to a friend and your kid just keeps interrupting? Parenting is one of the hardest things we can do as human beings. The incredible ability to make a life, followed by the wholly overwhelming realization that, well, now you're responsible for that life for roughly the next 2 decades. It's kind of like the Matrix. You can't really be told what it's like. You kind of have to experience it for yourself. As the generation that supposedly raised ourselves, parenting should be a natural evolution, right? Well, allow me to let you in on a little secret. We didn't raise ourselves. What we did was survive. And now we're raising and mentoring the generation that will have to make something of this Mad Max landscape that we now call life. Frankly, it feels like sometimes they're better at raising us than we are them. However you were raised and whatever your parenting style is now, there's one thing every parent can probably agree on. It's not at all what we thought it was going to be. There may not be an instruction manual for parenting, but we can call this episode a support group of sorts. Hi, we're GENeXorcists, and we're parents. Let's talk about it.
So, parenting from the X. Let's talk about it.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
I'm Luke.
I'm Heather.
Okay, so welcome to GENeXorcists, and today we're going to talk about parenting from Heather's shirt, the X.
Which I would try and show you, but it's wardrobe.
No, don't move it because it takes you so long to get it back this way.
Yeah, so parenting from the X, parenting as a Gen Xer. It has been quite a thing.
Well, okay. I am noticing more the more that I try to be conscious about the way that I parent, which I think is a big thing that a lot of people don't. I don't know. That might sound judgy. I hadn't parented consciously, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Until actually kind of recently. I think about the things that our parents did or didn't do.
Yeah.
And how that affected me at that age. And I just try to go into handling whatever situation I'm handling with my kids with that knowledge. Not just my dad yelled at me for keeping the door open too long, whatever. Not right. Like that kind of thing. Not just, we always keep the door closed because dad said so.
Right.
I've found that when you let them know why, and there's this whole counter argument to that one as well, where I'm the parent, they should do what I say no matter what. Yes. While that's partially true, they respond better if they understand why you're saying what you're saying.
Correct. I think that's the piece that our generation has kind of uncovered as we are uncovering our own generational traumas and our own personal traumas. Is like, okay, fine. I'm going in and out of the door. I don't know. I have to keep opening and shutting it. Well, I'm paying an electric bill and this is a real thing. You really are, that there's a change in temperature when you leave the door open. Could you please stop? And, when you explain that, that makes sense. Okay. I'll be more conscious about that.
We talk on here about what it's like growing up, all of the weird, sketchy, dangerous, questionable things we might have done as kids, right?
No, I have not done any of that.
No drive-in dance shows.
Um, I
Anyway, but we talk about that. I think, and we carry this forward with us, and you'll see where I'm going with this. But I think, like, for all of the wild, crazy, fun, dangerous times that we had, we also had to have some, like, we as a generation had to have a whole lot of more serious, like, hey,
Yeah.
we've got working parents, but we still need to eat. So we learned how to survive on Hot Pockets, not just the garden hose water, Hot
Right.
Pocket, things like that. So I tell people one of the things about Gen X is that we had to be grown-ups at 13.
Yeah.
But because of that, we're still 13 as grown-ups. So, like,
Right.
yeah.
I always say, like, I didn't age past 15. Like, I feel, and I don't think it's like an emotional, like, stuntness or anything. It's just that things happened that made me grow up very quickly. I was like, oh,
Yeah,
well, I'm done now. And
right.
then later, when, my parents died, I realized, oh, I wasn't done.
I don't know if you could think back, what is, like, a childhood memory that you have? Yeah, I want you to look back with your fully grown adult eyes and brain right now. If you can you do this?
I can
Because
attempt to. It's
think back to a time in your childhood where you were just, maybe in that moment you didn't know it, but now looking back with all the knowledge that you have, that it was just childhood. You didn't have the worries that somebody your age shouldn't have.
oh, um, oh, I feel like that is a trick question. Um, and I feel like I'm back in the physical therapist office, and they're like, "When was the last time you felt comfortable?" And I was like, "That's mean. Why are you asking that?" Because I don't know that I ever have been.
Right?
I mean, I was really good at compartmentalizing, and I think that's something that our generation was good at, and is why we want to be left alone,
That
because
is,
we just tucked things away, either because our parents were like, whatever, stand up, dust it off, you're fine.
yeah. Rub some dirt
And
on it, walk it off.
right,
Yeah,
and that could have been because you fell off your bike, or because your pet died, or grandpa died, or whatever. I mean, it
right.
didn't have to be just. I mean, what I will say for me personally, and I know this is a privilege as a Gen Xer,
Mhm.
I was not a latchkey kid. I think we've talked about that before. My
Yeah,
mom
yeah,
was home, my dad was retired, and my house was a place where everyone wanted to be.
yeah.
So I did always feel safe at home. I felt loved, I felt
Mhm.
accepted. I was very much a horrible teenager, so I'm not going with rose-colored glasses like, "Oh, everything was perfect," when I know I had a mouth on me, and an
Have-
attitude.
Oh yeah, like oh, I think about how awful of a kid I was, and I've mentioned that's partially why I was a little overprotective
Yeah,
earlier in my parenting.
yeah,
But that, like, you gave a good example, and your answer showed exactly what we mean when we say being grown up at 13,
yeah.
because 13-year-olds shouldn't have to compartmentalize that much.
No,
Yes, we were good as a generation at compartmentalizing, and we deal with the shit when we have to deal with the shit.
right,
When we don't want to think about it, we jump on the bikes and go play. Like, we
right,
could do that.
right. And now we're the generation unpacking all of those files from our filing
Right,
cabinet and our brains that
right.
have, been knocked over, and there's just a big pile of chaos.
It's a pile of chaos, a big pile of mess that was your life that you've
Trying,
got.
you're looking at it and you're going,
Yep.
what? Okay, and you put it back in.
Put it back in. Yep. But like, compartmentalizing is a great skill to learn. It's not necessarily a great skill to live with for multiple years on a stretch. You know what I mean?
Correct. It
Yeah.
turns from a skill to a survival mechanism.
Survival. And that's when it becomes survival, that's when you need to have an outlet.
Yeah.
To unpack, like you were saying. And again, our parents didn't know what they didn't know. They didn't know that sending us to talk to somebody, school counselor, even at that point, would have been more than anyone else was doing. And I know that's a big, broad blanket statement. Sure, some people were talking to the school counselor daily.
Right.
But who were those kids? Those were the troubled kids, right?
Right.
You didn't want to be a troubled kid talking to the school counselor every day. Let me tell you now, and this is just I mean, we can shift into now that we are parents.
Yeah.
The other thing that I say is we're still kids as the grown-ups.
Yeah.
And I think what what that means is I've just never let go of saying yes to ideas. Like, to me, that's childhood. You say yes to ideas. I know, right?
Whoops. Suddenly I'm having some guilt.
But no, to me, that's one of the biggest parts of childhood is our imagination, our whimsy, our willingness to try things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that's why we both probably found such comfort in Nesbitt's world, is because we got to put on other people. We could step outside of ourselves and become other people and not have to deal with the reality of what was actually happening in our own personal brains. We got to kind of put somebody else's brain on. I just, as a side note, when I saw Gene for the first time after graduating, it had been years, because Lori and I were together. We were in a restaurant and I was like, oh, that's my drama teacher. Oh my God. And I remember, like, I just immediately started crying. So I had to get myself together. And then I had to tell him, thank you for everything. You have no idea how much you actually kept me alive.
Right.
And it wasn't, they weren't just words. It was like the world that he created for us, and that safety net kept me here when so many other things were telling me I didn't want to be.
Yes. And we've talked about how he was instrumental to both of our lives. And it was good. I think one of the things, so I had Nesbitt's World. I also had one of my best friends went to Chancellor High School. So, Chancellor High School was our rival high school, and essentially had a very simple and probably unfair way to say it, but it was the perception when we were in school. Poor kids went to Cortland, our school. The richer kids went to Chancellor. So I was one of those kids who always wanted to go to somebody else's house because he had the coolest toys. But his dad was also a safe place for me.
Nice.
And I found that interesting. Now, when I look back, I find that interesting how you talk about your dad was retired and your mom was home running a daycare. My mom ran a daycare out of the house as well, but dad worked. And dad worked hard. And dad was that come in, and then once he came in, he sat down on his chair and he watched TV. He got up for dinner.
Yeah.
But he was, and I get now, he was exhausted. Back then, it was dad comes home and sits down and he doesn't participate and like things like that. But he was more involved than I realized.
Yes.
But that's part of the whole, okay. Not being a kid, but I can relate to my kids still.
Right.
they need a safe place. I wanted to make my house Nesbitt's World and my best friend's house and like all the places that we feel safe while still maintaining the whimsy and the curiosity of being a kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I had always wanted as well. And I think now that we're here, when we were in Virginia, it was really hard to do that because, I mean, we lived out in the country. We
Yeah.
lived on like a mini farm. So getting, it could take you an hour to get milk. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
just to get to the place to get milk. But here, I mean, we definitely are one of those houses where the kids know they can come in, they're welcome. I mean, the new generation, I mean, besides the fact that they're just amazing, and I know we're going to touch way more on that in a little bit, but I mean, they're just built so differently and just it's almost like an honor to watch them. And I think part of that is because, as Gen Xers, and am in no way excusing abusive behaviors. That is not anywhere where I'm
No.
going because that is never, ever, ever okay. But we can only parent to the best of our ability. And the best
Absolutely.
of our ability is formed from our experiences and informed by, how we were raised.
Right.
So my parents, I mean, my dad grew up in the hills of West Virginia. My mom grew up between Rose Hill, Virginia, and parts of Maryland. She had 3 children by the time she was 21. She was a child having children.
Children. Yeah.
So, I came along and I definitely was a force to be reckoned with, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, so watching us, parent and knowing what we took from our parents, knowing what we saw that we left behind from our parents. And I
Mhm.
think figuring out how to heal has been pivotal in how the new generation is being parented.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't know about you, but I know like when I was growing up, we talk about how shitty of a kid I was. Expelled from 5th grade.
Yeah.
You've got to be kind of shitty to be expelled from 5th grade. Not like, oh, you're gonna have to stay after a couple of days. It was, you're so heinous, we don't want you to come back to this school at all.
Right.
Have a nice life, kind of thing. Yeah. So I was kicked out at 5th grade, kicked out of public school, sent to a Christian school. But even then, and I'm trying to think back if it was more parents, if it was more the school, but you didn't go talk to somebody because, and I mentioned this before, you talked to somebody if something was wrong with you.
Correct.
And I'm using my air quotes, or as my youngest calls them, the sarcastic fingers.
Yes. For
Yeah,
those
so
listening
sarcastic.
in.
What's that?
For those listening in,
For those listening in,
doing
sarcastic
air quotes.
fingers,
Yes.
air quotes. And it's always been a thing, and that's what everybody shouts about is removing the stigma from mental health care.
Correct.
And it took a lot. It's still, there's still a way to go on that, but it's been removed a lot. Like it has been lessened. It has been minimized as much as possible. The
Yeah.
And we try to, like, all of my kids have spoken to a therapist at some point.
Right. Right. And
And
there is
had,
absolutely no shame in that.
no, not at all. I encourage it more than, like, I've
Right.
been through it. LJ's been through it. I encourage it. I think everybody should.
I have always said everyone needs a therapist, and I've been saying that since I was a kid, but
Yeah. And I think that's one of the ways that if you step back, if we as parents from Gen X, we kind of carry Gen X as like a badge of honor that we survived it.
Right.
But That's great, and it is a badge of honor. I'm so proud of myself for surviving Gen X and becoming a functional member of society. There are a bunch of us that couldn't get past
Right.
the weirdness that was the 80s and early 90s. But that being said, oh, the rambles. I go on and on. Where was I going with that? Remind me. This
I
is Swiss cheese brain. What did I just say?
Parenting.
Parenting. If we look back and we like, and I learned this in therapy, but look back and think about how you felt in those situations.
Right.
What would have made it easier for you? I don't
Right.
know. If my dad said, "Hey, I don't know how to handle this, but let's go talk to somebody who does know how to handle it."
Right.
But we had parents that if they didn't know how to handle it, they were, well, I don't know, go to your room, deal with it, suck it up. Because at that point, they've
Right.
exhausted everything they know. They
Right.
don't want their kid to have something wrong with them, again, air quotes.
Right.
But yeah, so like I look back and I go, oh, somebody to talk to would have been nice. Or just somebody to tell me that this anger I'm feeling isn't necessarily anger.
Right.
It it's jealousy. It's sadness.
Right.
It's feeling like ignored.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
and that's, I guess, we've talked about trying to break generational curses before. In my family, we call it stomping out fires.
Yeah.
So anytime something happens, like where we're handling it almost like our parents would have, either I or LJ will kind of, hey, babe, take a pause. We're trying to stomp out a fire here. And like, it gives us it's literally just a code to take a breath, take a beat. And a lot of times that helps too.
Parenting from my perspective in how our family became to be,
Yeah.
our family was formed through foster care and adoption. So we already entered into parenthood with children, not babies,
Right.
like
Right.
fully formed children that
Yep.
had already had those first 6 years of pivotal brain chemistry
Yep.
formation, of connection formation, of all of that. And then we went through 3.5 years of being in the system
Yeah.
and trying to navigate through all of that. So, in the beginning, our parenting style was like all over because every one of our children needed a different parenting style. And, that was when we came to terms with that,
Yeah.
it finally, like, it relieved some of the stress because I was like, what the hell am I doing wrong? And it wasn't that I was necessarily doing anything wrong. It was like, once I just was like, oh, that's fine. I'm three moms. Like literally,
Right.
it became easier. And then I had to work through a whole lot of my own stuff because triggers abound when you're raising children under a microscope.
Yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah. I can imagine.
and other people are still involved.
Yeah.
And it just, I there's that commercial for, adopting teenagers that says you don't have to be perfect to be the perfect parent. And like, I in no way, shape, or form will ever claim that like I was not making mistakes left and right. But we
Holy
were doing what we had to do, to get through the day. I mean, one of my children, literally, they arrived on a Monday. And one of the reasons why I laugh because God is a funny God. And one of the reasons why I did not have children, like, give birth, uh, is because I knew I would throw up. And then I was afraid I'd hold that against the child. And then I knew the child was going to throw up. And then I was afraid I was going to hold that against the child. Like, and they're babies. And I wasn't really going to hold anything against anyone. It's just the one of
Sure.
those thoughts. And I do not have the complete mental diagnosis of the fear of throwing up. However, I am not good at it.
I was
And
gonna,
perhaps because,
however,
Insert picture of Heather's bleeding face from when she throws up. Did you?
Right?
Yeah. I burst. It's with force. I've gotten better. This has taken a turn, but anyway.
Yeah, you kind of went
Um, but
left with this one.
the joke is they arrived on Monday, and by Friday, he started throwing up every single day for 2.5 years. Not
Yeah.
baby puke.
No,
8-year-old,
full-grown kid puke.
full grown kid puke. Welcome to parenthood.
Right.
That was not in any of the textbooks, by the way, because when
You
you
didn't know the protocol for that one.
I didn't know the protocol. I didn't get stretch marks. I got paper cuts. I don't know.
You know, I like that.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Now I would not trade any one of those days. Obviously, I would much prefer for my children to not have gone through what they went through.
Right.
However,
Absolutely.
that formed them the same way me going through what I've gone through formed me. So, and the difference now is, therapy is way more, and I'm going to say this as a caveat, it's way more accessible than it was when we were growing up. Because, like
Right.
you said, you only went if you were like killing the small animals and like,
Yeah. If something was
like
wrong.
like really bad. Whereas by the time my kids came around, there were more counselors. We understood, oh, hey, kids need a whole lot of stimulation and
Right.
services and all sorts of stuff by the time they're 6, or bad things
Yeah.
can happen, because that's when these parts of the brain are formed, and you can't go back and rewire that.
No.
Once it's there, it's there. So, and we were learning more and more and more now. And as Gen Xers, we talked about this in a different episode, but it is a privilege to be able to have the accessibility that we have to mental health care. And
Oh,
I mean
such
that
a
by my
privilege.
family,
Yeah.
because not everybody has that luxury. And I will shout to them blue in the face that healthcare isn't a privilege, it's a right.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that. I'd
You
also
made
like
me be
to,
born, now take care of this body.
right? I'd also like to take this opportunity just to, for all the listeners, if you're listening to this, I want you to know that we are fully aware we use the term something wrong with you. We know that that term is misused all the time. There's nothing wrong with you just because you're going to talk to somebody. Everybody's brain works differently. And parenting taught me that more than anything else in the world. Like you said, you
Right.
became 3 moms.
Right.
I had to learn to be 4 dads because
Yeah.
I tried to parent. That's different. Parenting them, you don't parent them equally.
You parent them individually.
Yeah,
I mean,
not
that
equally, but like with equity, like
with
not.
equity, exactly.
Yeah, so like
Yes.
yeah, you not equally, but with equity, so that they like you're still fair, but grounding the third born from video games isn't going to help like
Right.
it does the firstborn,
Right.
because the thirdborn doesn't give a shit about video games. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Yeah. So,
absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
that's kind of a dumb, easy, cheesy example, but it's
Well,
real.
it's
It's real.
it's real.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I'm laughing because I was the fourth born, and there is a significant age difference between myself and my siblings.
Yeah.
So they were 18, 16, and 14 when I was born.
Ooh.
So
Yeah.
at a certain point, I think my parents were just tired.
Oh, sure.
Which might be why I won't say I got away with stuff, but my mom was amazing. Like I do believe in natural consequences. I believe in, if you're gonna get mad and you're gonna break that thing, well, now you don't have that thing. Like,
Yeah.
if you didn't want to come talk, or you didn't want to do X, Y, and Z, or any of these other skills that we've been trying to do, and you didn't want to phone a friend, and you broke it, well, you broke it. And we're not
Yeah.
gonna, in our case, it was like you puked on it, now it's gotta be thrown away. Like,
Well,
there you go.
yeah, and that kind of goes you were talking about, we take what works and then we leave
Yeah.
behind what doesn't. For me, we also have to take what works, not just for the kids, but what works for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, I was getting, I think I wasn't necessarily parenting right. Not that there's a right way, but I wasn't parenting the way that best worked for my children.
Right.
And I was getting mad at them because I wasn't parenting each one correctly, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does.
I had to learn to basically, like, okay, this one does this, and stop getting mad at them. It's me. I need to, just because they're not listening doesn't mean they don't hear me.
Right.
If that makes sense. They're not, like, I've
Right.
got one kid, I could tell her till I'm blue in the face that touching the blue part of the blowtorch is not going to feel good. And she won't believe me until she touches the blue part of the blowtorch. And then she's, I burned my finger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember telling you that would happen. Come with me and I will help. Yeah, I will help you bandage it up. And at this point, being the dad, I won't not tell them. I still feel like I need to parent. My son's 23, has a job, a very good job with the government or contracting with the government and stuff. And I'll still give him the advice.
Oh, yeah.
And then I just kind of step back and wait for him to come in and be like, oh, Dad, you were right. It happens.
Yes, it does happen. Like when my mom would parent with natural consequences, the one thing that I remember clear as day is I came out for 5th grade parent, like back to school night.
Okay.
With blue eyeshadow from like here to, I swear to God, like here. But it was probably just like this, like just, and red lips. And my mom was like, that's how you're going to go? And I was like, yeah, what's wrong with it? Okay. We just get in the car and I get to the school and the teachers are like, Heather Dancer, what? Oh my God. So like, I mean, and I was in 5th grade. So application, like, I mean, I just looked like a cartoon character. It's okay that these people were saying things to me. I don't think they were trying to shame me. They were shocked.
Yes.
And like looking at my mom, and my mom is just like, and I'm pretty sure at this point, my mom was probably like, thank you. Like standing behind, like, yeah, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm sure she learned very early on that it comes better from anyone else.
Oh, my God. I hate that so much. We all know, like, that's just I think that's a universal parenting thing.
Yeah.
That's not exclusive to Gen X.
No.
I hate it.
It also goes with spouses. Like I will be like, hey, X, Y, and Z. And my spouse will be like, pfft. And then 3 days later we'll come home and be like, hey, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z because so-and-so at work said it would help. Okay. Cool. So I've just.
Okay. And this is fun because I feel like a lot of times we always make the joke that between the 4 of us are relationships, that we could pluck anybody out and just replace them with each other.
Yeah.
Although I do feel like my Lori and you are a little more similar, and me and your Lori are kind of similar. That being said, I am guilty of this. I'm guilty of doing this to LJ, but let me explain what happens, because it does it. And I know what happens up here and how it comes out are 2 different things, and how it's received on that end is really what matters.
Right.
But what happens, it's never intentional that LJ tells me, hey, you should, take out the trash with an extra bag, blah, blah, blah. Never told me that. This is just my made up on the spot example. Okay.
Yes. Which was great. You should do improv.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Yes, and that's all I know about improv. Yes,
always say yes. Keep saying yes.
Always say yes. I'm like the kids sometimes where I'm like, yeah, I know, but I've been doing it this way forever and it'll work. And then it doesn't work. And then I do it the way that she said, or Heather or my friend Bobby will be like, yeah, I was doing that. And then I started using 2 bags because, it's just a lot easier. And what that conversation usually is, yeah, LJ suggested that too. And I think I'm going to start doing it because she's on to something. Okay. Like I'm acknowledging that she told me, but I'm acknowledging to my friend who also told me.
Right.
So then I'll come home, and when she sees me doing it, she'll be like, oh, she's like, oh, you'll take out the trash. And then I'll go like grab a double bag. Again, all made up. I am good at this. I'll go grab the double bag, and then she'll be like, oh, you're doing a double bag? And I'll say, yeah, Bobby and I were talking about it. And instantly she's like, I was talking to you about that. Now I'm in the mode where I'm like, oh, yeah, it sounds like I'm only listening to my friends. So all of that to just point out maybe your Lori is hearing you more than you think. She just doesn't know how to make the look at you shaking your head.
I mean, I don't know. We're 24 years into this. I mean,
yeah, that's
I am not trying to compare or contrast or say we got the years in, but what I'm going to compare is that we have the years in.
I was going to say, but you do have the years in. You've got 24 years.
I have more. I have been with her for over half of my life.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she's not listening to me.
Yeah. I've known LJ for like 10 or 12.
Yeah.
But we've only been married 8.5. So like, yeah.
Oh, that's so cute.
What?
Just kidding.
That I know the halves?
No.
I'm still counting in months.
That is 8. Exactly.
Right.
Aww. That's sweet. I bet you still remember your anniversary.
37 months. 36. Just say 3 years, damn it. At that point.
Excuse me, where are your 48-month clothes? Speaking of which, my little bit came to us in 24 months. He was wearing 24 months.
He was wearing 24 months clothes?
And was 3.5.
Yeah. He's itty bitty pocket person, and I love him to death.
He's itty bitty.
My son is 6'4", weighs about 230 pounds, and I don't know why we're comparing our kids' sizes, because I was talking about months.
Because it would be fun to put them side by side and take a picture.
Oh my God!
Well, because we used to always do that with him and Zane and be like,
yeah.
But Zane, when Zane was born, and I know 24 inches is a common. I mean, I think it is. I don't know. I haven't done the birth thing. But he was 24 inches when he was born. So I was like, this kid was born at 2 feet tall. We should have known he was going to just keep growing.
Yeah. I was 24, I think, when I was born too.
Yeah. I was like 6. I was tiny. I have a theory that little bitty babies grow up to be very big people.
Well, if the inverse of that is true, that could be, I mean, if that's true, then the inverse could be true as well, because Natalie, our smallest child, was like 10 pounds.
She came out that size.
Pretty much.
She was full grown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wild though, that because she's our littlest and she was like the biggest of the kids. But they're just like, the thing that's really cool about our kids, and especially the youngest, is like, we've talked about this before. I've mentioned it before to you. I don't know if we've said it on the air yet, but I feel like they are the new Gen X in a sense. Like,
I think they're Gen X Part 2, 2.0, revised.
2.0, yeah.
The way it was supposed to be.
They have the burden of being conscious of the consequences of their actions. Like, and the duration of those consequences, because they have the internet. Like, we were learning, oh, if I put this on the internet, it's always there. We found that out the hard way. Our generation did. In
like our 20s.
Yes.
Because I don't even know if we could put, I don't think I put a picture on the internet until MySpace.
I was going to say it was probably MySpace. And I'm a late adopter to a lot of stuff. So I didn't even have a MySpace.
Yeah.
I was a nerd. I told you I was a nerd.
Listen, let me just lean in real close, because MySpace, and if If you are a Gen Xer that had a MySpace, you'll remember we could put music in the background. You could make your page look any way you wanted. You could add countdown clocks for vacations or fun things. You could kind of blog, and it wasn't like interactive. There wasn't any keyboard cowboys out there telling you no bots, no none of that. It was just my space, my little space on the internet where
It
I
was
could
absolutely
go and be comforted. I miss those days.
What was your top 8? Wasn't that a thing? Like your songs, you had your top 8 on MySpace?
I don't remember.
I don't know. I never had it, but I remember people talking about like you could add songs, and it was like there was a section where you could put like your top 8 or something like that.
Well, what's funny, and look at me getting a good transition, and
Uh-huh.
there was a song in a movie called
Oh, look, she's flipping through her mental Rolodex. That's what that pause was.
Many Drivers in it. Crap. I don't remember the name of it, but it had a
Okay.
song called Beautiful. And that is the song I played for my mama at their funeral. And yes, I said their funeral. And the only place I could get it was off of MySpace.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I still can't find it anywhere. I do have it on CD from when we had to download it and then record it onto the CD. Like you couldn't purchase it. Like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
there it was nowhere. I think when I think of music in MySpace, that's really all. I think of the jingles that we could put on our space because
Uh-huh.
it could make music and you could make the screen do things. But then I think of that song Beautiful that I played for my mama. Yeah, the parenting thing and parenting from the ex became super complicated for me because I became an orphan and a legally finalized forever parent in the same year.
Yeah.
So
And a legalized like full parent again to grown children. Like
correct.
to
And
not babies. Yeah.
no, not babies. And we had our two oldest had been living with us for 3.5 years, but
Mm-hmm.
our little bit had only arrived. My parents died in April of 2011, and I picked up little bit on like October 18th for
Mm-hmm.
permanent placement. So
Yeah.
he had only been with us for what, that's 6-7 months before my
Yeah.
parents died.
Ooh.
So I had a toddler and no parents. And I think the thing that upsets me the most about it is like we've talked about my parents and their lives and like how
Mhm.
amazing they were and how my friends love them. And I mean, it was standing room only at their funeral. They died 4 days apart of unrelated causes.
Yeah.
So we ended up having a joint funeral.
Right.
Standing room only, lots of people got up and spoke. And just you got to see the impact that they had made. You know, my mom never knew a stranger. But here I am with these two. Again, I'm not trying to come into it with rose colored glasses. A
No.
lot changed for us when my sister died when I was 19. She was 35, I was 19. And we became a much more touchy feely, lovey, I love you, talk 4 times a day kind of family.
Right. Right.
I think because I learned, or we all learned that, you know, it was finite. Life isn't
Right.
infinite. It's there's finite amount of
Yeah.
time that we have together. So what upsets me the most is like I had these amazing parents. Lori got to have like the best in-laws.
Yeah.
Seriously, like there's bajillion stories of how they're the best. But my kids got robbed of grandparents. Like
Yep.
they didn't
I
get
understand that.
they didn't get. I mean,
Well,
Zane and Lou
you
did. They got to be with them, you know, and got to know them for those 3.5 years. But
Yeah.
there was so much other stuff going on. The
Well,
placement of my parents in their memory is not
it
obviously what I
is.
want it to be.
Yeah. I understand that. Um, my parents weren't. My parents weren't as involved with my kids' lives, and that due to some situational stuff in the relationship, the previous relationship. That being said, when you talk about like you became a parent at an orphan in like the same year, my I want to say Tate was in college when my dad passed. But for me, the hardest part, was we talk about like, okay, our parents didn't know what they didn't know, and we talk about our traumas, and we talk about how like for what they knew, they did a great job. But if they knew, I found myself after dad passed, and I'd been through like all of raising one kid,
Yeah.
most of raising another one, and like I got better as I went, but I still found myself like reaching for the phone to text dad and be like, hey, what would you do? And then it's like, oh, that remind. And so for me, I wasn't done learning how to be a dad when
Right.
my example was taken away.
Correct. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, that's an interesting. We are at an interesting age. We Gen X is at an interesting age where our parents are going to start dying. Like,
Yeah.
we're at that age anyway. Some of us got that early.
Yeah. I was
You know,
34. I was 30.
right.
I wasn't done being raised, let alone
No,
just started
no.
out raising children.
Yeah, we
Um,
still have like a lot to learn when our parents go, and it's just like do your best. So,
yeah.
and I think it's interesting you talked about the joint funeral, and there was standing room only and all of that. And my dad passed during COVID. So our celebration of his life pretty much happened the very next day. Everybody who could come was there at their house, and we were sitting out on the front patio just having some beers and telling stories about dad.
Yeah.
And we would toast to him every like at the end of every story it'd be like to dad, and like to this day we're recording this today on the 4th of July. Today's my dad's birthday.
Yeah.
And like first thing we all said as we woke up this morning, good morning to dad. And it's like everybody
Yeah.
knows. Yeah. So there is a heaviness to being a parent without parents.
Very much so.
And I think where we were going with all of that is kind of, we were talking about this generation though, and how they're kind of the new Gen X.
Yeah.
And I see that with my youngest, where she's willing to go do the wild crazy shit. And when I say wild crazy shit, she loves to have fun. Like,
Yeah.
hey, let's go have fun. Let's have people look at us and think we're weird. We don't care. I consider that a parenting win, that she
Yeah.
doesn't care what other people think.
Correct.
But they've got they're more socially aware than I ever was at that age.
Right. You had said earlier something about like they bear the burden of knowing that what they do could be out there forever.
Yes.
Because of the internet. And then they also bear the burden of everything that all the generations before them did so wrong.
Yes.
And, we're looking at them like how do we fix this? And, have two 80-year-olds trying to figure out who's going to run the country. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah,
It
for
doesn't,
sure.
it doesn't, the battles that they have to fight aren't battles they should have to fight. We should have done that. We should have done better at
Oh
that.
yeah.
But I think we
No,
were too
no.
busy unpacking our Gen X trauma
Yes.
and
But
then
here and
making new life and then going, oh fuck, I gotta raise this baby. what
yeah.
what do I do? I don't want to
Oh
break
god.
it.
I wasn't ready.
Yeah. I just I didn't read the fine print.
But that's kind of why I'm seeing a lot of parallels between our youngest and us. In that, like I said earlier in this episode, if there wasn't the stigma of there's something wrong with me and I could have had a therapist to help me unpack that.
Right.
Because you just said we're Gen X. We're in the middle of unpacking all of our shit from growing up.
Right.
When we
And expected to
create
save the world.
right. And then we create new life, the next generation coming in.
Right.
And we're all about fixing how scrambled our brains are.
Right.
But we're not there.
Right.
I'm seeing that kind of as a good thing though, because I'm all about therapy. So
Yes.
when Natalie comes home and says, "Hey, I am not doing well. I'm feeling lost, or I'm feeling like," she knows she can go talk to somebody.
Right.
You know, not
Yes.
just she can, but we encourage her to. We've removed, that's the generational trauma, generational curse that we're trying to stomp out.
Yeah.
Is the you can go. So to me, it's like,
yeah,
I wanted to change the world when I was 15. I didn't know how. I was busy just trying to keep my shit together.
Correct.
And that's where they are too, but nobody told me I could talk to somebody else about it. I'm
Right.
telling them that they can't. So I consider them like a new Gen X where they're going to change the world,
Right.
but they're going to do it with a much better head on their shoulders than I ever would have.
Well, do you want to hear something mind blowing?
I really do.
And I have, because I have theories about this. And I mean, it's not theory, it's just science. But, so when we talk about generational trauma, it doesn't necessarily even have to be things that were done to us or things that our parents didn't or didn't know, because you were inside your grandmother.
Yes.
And went through everything that she went through while she was pregnant with your mother.
Yeah.
And then you were inside your mom. Like, that's the thing, like, for her entire life until you were born.
Yep.
So those things pass down. I mean, like, it's been scientifically proven that in utero is also a very important part of it. And I don't think that we focus on in utero like when your mom's being formed in utero.
Right.
Because as uterus having people, all of our eggs are formed when we're,
in the beginning. Yeah.
In the beginning. In the beginning, all of the and so that, I mean, the trauma carries down whether or not
it does. And I've
to.
also recently learned about like how it passes. And it's literally, it's a chemical and biological thing.
It is.
And you're right. They've seen examples. I've been shown examples. Yeah, we'll get into it in another episode. But there are things that come from that whole generational trauma that you can learn to use. And maybe that's something we'll talk about in a future episode.
Absolutely. I mean, because, in some ways, like me personally, I am parenting from the Depression and then the boomer or whatever. My mom would have been born in 1942.
Yeah.
And then
sure
the X. Yeah, I think she was like one of the first waves of the boomer. Well, I mean, that's just a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. That's a lot that we carry through. So I don't know why our brains weren't seen as important body parts, because clearly they know that they need the brain to function, the heart, the lungs, all that. But then the emotion, we're still discovering so much about all of that.
Right. That's what I was going to say. It's another case of we don't know what we don't know.
Correct.
Didn't know what we didn't know. Like I just recently watched the movie, A Crowded Room. I want to say it's on Apple. It's the story of how basically DID,
yeah,
dissociative identity disorder, became an actual medical thing. It's like the first case that made it a code so that
Yeah.
doctors take it seriously, kind of thing. And when you look at that, that was late 70s, early 80s.
Right. Well, and I mean, even in that part, excuse me, one of my diagnoses would have been homosexuality. Like, I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
I
Like
didn't
that's
even
a
know that,
condition.
right. Like it, right.
Treating
And
that as a condition. Yeah.
one of my pieces that I have in my room here. And for those of you watching, one day you'll get to see lots of the pieces in the room. For those of you listening, you can then go look for the video to see the pieces in the room. But I have the Evaluation Center for Disturbed Women, Ward B. I have that sign, but like Lori didn't grow up with her maternal grandmother because she was institutionalized after she gave birth to her mother, to
Yeah.
Lori's mother. Now, that's all that she knew. Looking back, that was probably postpartum depression,
Oh, yeah.
untreated.
Yep.
You know, I will say, just as a side note, because spiritually, from my perspective, you know, when we came in, we were supposed to be the trailblazers, path carvers, so that as the other generations came in, we would not have had all these problems. But we got distracted.
Yeah.
And I think that's because some of the tools that we have, I'm just going to put it out there. Like, I don't know that we were ready for the internet as a,
No.
species.
Right.
But anyway, I digress. So spiritually, I believe words have power. So yes, I have this sign, but right underneath it in cross stitch is cheer up loser. So
Cheer up, loser.
there's a balance.
Yes.
That I feel like that's also like how we should end the Gen X talk, because it's like cheer up loser. You're
Cheer up,
fine.
loser.
Wipe it off.
Exactly. Well, see, that's the other thing, and I know we're starting to get really close on time, but I did want to bring up, like, we talk about the good and the bad. So I think one of the good things is also kind of can be a bad thing, but it is that whole, like, suck it up. This is not the worst thing you're going. Like, we fully understand when our Gen Alpha kid is freaking out because for whatever reason.
Right.
Hey, this outfit is not the worst thing that's going to happen to you. You know,
Right.
your friend who you thought was one of your best friends talking shit behind your back. Yeah, it sucks. And I'm here to help be that soft spot for you to land in. But
Yeah.
it is not the worst thing you're going to go through.
Yeah. I
Like,
used to say all the time, like, your survival rate, you've been through this before, and your survival rate has been 100%.
yeah,
Like, did you die? No, you didn't die from this. I don't say that anymore, since one of my kids did die
yeah.
from some. So, but yeah, that
But
was awkward.
I think the combination of our kind of flippant attitude towards the minor bullshit,
Yeah.
like, we don't tolerate the minor bullshit as Gen X. We're done. We want to hide. We want to be left alone.
Right.
I think we're passing that part on
Yes.
to the kids. We're trying to pass that part on to the kids.
Yeah.
But somehow we have also passed on a, question authority, burn down the establishment, start it for yourself, to restart it for yourself kind of thing.
Yeah.
Our
Yeah.
generation talked about it a lot. We had punk, we had all this stuff that we like you said, we were supposed to be the ones to blaze that trail.
Yeah.
And that our alphas, our littlest ones that are being born are the ones who are going to change. And I think it's one of the biggest ways of parenting that I shifted my parenting style from, I want to raise you to be the best person that you are. It's now I want to raise you so that you're ready to fix the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I want the world to be ready for you, not you ready for the world. That's kind of how I'm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes to all of that. And I think with the whole, so many people late in life being diagnosed with autism and being diagnosed with ADHD, and we understand that, gifted wasn't necessarily a gift, and things like that. We're able to help the kids so much quicker, much more
Quick,
word
much more
vomit,
quickly, much
word vomit,
much more quicker.
or there. And the stigmas, like you've said, like I've said, the stigma's going away, and so we're
Yeah.
giving them the tools to
Hmm.
use their brains completely and take what people used to, and like, we don't believe there's problems. That's like, I know you defined that for the listener, and I just want to point out to you that you were using it in past tense, and that is the important part, is that is how we grew up. Like, there was
Yes.
something, and we don't say that. That's not our vernacular anymore.
Right.
And part of that is because we're learning, like, oh, nothing was wrong with me. I'm
Right.
just a talkative,
Yeah.
bouncy kid. Like, my brain chemistry needed help.
I
Um,
think, yeah. And I think part of what makes this generation like so amazing is that they see that and they understand, okay, different isn't bad.
Correct. Different
And
isn't
that's
bad.
different isn't bad. And it's that level of acceptance.
Yeah.
We try to throw a label on stuff we don't understand. So, autism, ADHD has, I'm not saying they're not real. Obviously, they are real things that happen, but it has become a label to say your brain works differently than the normal person.
Right.
This generation, everybody has a label. And what they're learning, what we are learning, and they are learning even more is nobody is normal.
Right. It's just a
And
setting on
because
your
they
diet.
understand that and accept that as part of what being a human is, they're the ones that are going to change the planet. I'm really looking forward to a day with us when we can bring our littles on.
Yes.
I want to bring our youngest on and just have like a let's talk about life in the future, because I think that would be cool to
Yes.
just discuss what their vision of the future looks like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I love it. I
But
love it.
until we can do that, you see my transitions are good too. Until we can do that, you guys smash all those buttons, hit the likes, hit the subscribes, and keep following us so you don't miss an episode.
That's right. Keep following us so you can find out what we're going to talk about next. And until then, bye.
Bye.